My husband secretly recorded our arguments to prove I was crazy until I found the folder he forgot to hide and played everything for his family at a holiday dinner he was hosting. I keep typing and deleting the first line because nothing about this feels real, and also because I can already hear the way he would describe me if he saw this. Dramatic, unstable, looking for attention, and that is kind of the whole problem. I'm 31, I live in Spokane, I work a boring job that makes me stare at spreadsheets until my eyes feel hot, and I married Ellis 3 years ago. And if you'd asked me a little while ago, I would have said we have the normal couple arguments, money, stress, chores, whose turn it is to call the plumber, little snippy comments that turn into bigger snippy comments. Then we cool off, we move on. Except we weren't moving on, we were stacking things. The first time I noticed something was off, it was small, like so small I didn't even trust my own brain about it. Ellis would argue with me. Then later he'd bring up my exact words with this weird precision, like he'd memorized them. And I thought maybe he was just the type to fixate. Some people are like that. They hold onto phrases like they're receipts. Then he started doing this thing where he'd smirk when I got emotional. Not even angry, just emotional. Like the moment my voice cracked or I teared up, he'd get this look like he'd won something. And the look made me feel stupid and exposed, which of course made me more emotional, which of course made him more satisfied, like he was training me in real time. I'm not proud of how I react when I feel cornered. I get sharp. I interrupt. I talk too fast. I jump ahead. I do that thing where my brain tries to solve everything at once and my mouth can't keep up. And I know that can look like chaos from the outside. But I'm not throwing things. I'm not threatening anyone. I'm not doing anything scary. I'm just overwhelmed and trying to get a point across to someone who keeps twisting every point into a different point. Ellis has this calm voice he uses. I used to think it was maturity. Now I think it's performance, because he would stay calm while saying things that were designed to make me lose it. Little comments about my memory, about me being dramatic, about how I'm always rewriting things, about how I'm exhausting. And he'd say it like he was narrating a documentary, not insulting his wife. It got worse after we hosted his family for the first time in our house. Not because that day itself was a disaster. It was fine on the surface. His mom brought her usual polite smile. His sister showed up late and acted like everyone should be grateful she showed up at all. His dad mostly watched football and disappeared into the bathroom whenever anything tense happened. The normal. But after they left, Ellis acted like I had embarrassed him even though nobody had said anything. He kept bringing up little moments, like how I didn't laugh enough at his mom's story, or how I corrected Ellis about a detail from his childhood. Not even in a mean way, just, no, it was 2 years ago, not one. And Ellis acted like that was some huge disrespect, like I'd challenged his whole identity in front of his family. The argument that night started over dishes, which makes me want to scream because how does this kind of thing start over dishes? He left a pile in the sink after promising he'd do them because I cooked. I came home from work and saw them. My brain went straight into the exhausted resentment place. And I made a comment, not a kind comment, but also not the end of the world, just something like, cool, so you lied again about doing the dishes. He immediately went calm, which should have been the first red flag all by itself, because most people get defensive, but he went calm like he was stepping onto a stage. He started talking about how my tone was the problem, and how I was always attacking, and how he couldn't even relax in his own house because I'm constantly looking for something to be upset about. And something in me snapped, because I wasn't upset about dishes. I was upset about being treated like a nuisance in my own marriage. I was upset about doing all the little invisible stuff, and then being told I'm dramatic if I notice. I remember walking into the living room because I needed space from the sink and the smell of old soap. And I remember seeing Ellis's phone sitting face down on the coffee table. And I remember noticing the top of it was slightly lifted, like it wasn't flat on the table, like something was propping it up. And I didn't think anything of it. I just remember it because later my brain replayed that angle like a movie frame. Ellis followed me and kept talking, calm voice, calm face, and he said something like, "You always do this. You always escalate." And he kept using the word always, which is such a cheap word in an argument, because it turns one moment into a personality defect. I told him to stop speaking like I'm a case study, and he did that little smirk again, and he said, "See, this is what I mean, you can't just talk normally." I know I raised my voice. I know I did, because I can hear it in my head, that loud, sharp voice that comes out when I feel like I'm not being heard. And I told him he was baiting me. I told him he liked pushing me until I looked like the bad guy, and he shrugged like I was being ridiculous. And he told me I needed help. He told me I needed to work on myself. That phrase, I'm not exaggerating. It felt like a trap closing, because it was so vague and so absolute, like there was no world where he was wrong and I was right. There was only a world where I'm defective and he's patiently surviving me. After that night, I started noticing little things. His phone always face down. His watch always on even when he claimed it was dead. His laptop suddenly locked with a new password even though we'd never had that kind of secrecy before. And then he started saying weird things like, I don't want to argue if you're going to twist it later, or I want to keep this factual, and he'd say it like he was building a record. I should have trusted my gut then. I should have pushed harder. But honestly, I was tired. I was still trying to believe in the version of him I married. And also, it's hard to accuse someone of something you can't prove, because you start feeling like you're the crazy one, which I'm sure is not an accident. The holiday dinner we were hosting was Ellis's idea. He announced it like a big gesture, like he was being generous. He wanted his parents and his sister and her husband and Ellis's uncle and aunt, and a cousin who always shows up, the whole group. And he acted like it was going to be this nice reset, like maybe we'd been tense and this would bring everyone together. I didn't want to host, not because I hate people, but because hosting in our house with Ellis's family always turns me into an employee. I'm the one cleaning corners nobody sees. I'm the one making sure the bathroom has enough soap. I'm the one checking that there's enough seating. And Ellis gets to do the fun part, greeting people, pouring drinks, being charming, being the guy everyone likes. And then later I get lectured about how I didn't smile enough. I tried to suggest we go somewhere else, not a restaurant. I wasn't trying to spend money, just maybe do it at his parents' place. But Ellis dismissed it immediately and said he wanted to show everyone how good we are doing, which was a weird phrasing, show everyone, like it was a presentation. The week leading up to it was miserable. Ellis was nice in this performative way, doing chores without being asked, sending sweet texts, touching my shoulder when he walked by, like he was staging a version of us, and every time he did it I felt suspicious instead of loved, which made me feel guilty because who feels suspicious when their husband is being nice? 2 nights before the dinner, Ellis and I had one of our dumbest arguments yet. It started over something tiny, a missing package. He claimed I moved it. I claimed I didn't. And then it turned into him accusing me of being careless. Then him accusing me of never taking responsibility. And then him doing the calm voice again. And then me getting frustrated. And then him making that little satisfied face like he'd gotten what he wanted. I went to the bedroom and shut the door, not slamming it, just closing it. And I sat on the edge of the bed staring at the carpet. And I remember thinking, I don't even know what we're doing anymore, because every disagreement felt like it was being saved somewhere, like he was collecting proof of something. The next day I borrowed Ellis's laptop. I know, I can already hear people saying don't snoop. But it wasn't even a planned snoop. My laptop had died. I needed to print a shipping label for a return, and Ellis was in the shower. And his laptop was sitting on the table, and I opened it and tried the password we've used forever, and it worked, which surprised me because he'd been acting secretive. The shipping site was slow, and while it loaded I clicked the Finder window because I needed the PDF, and I saw a folder in the sidebar that made my stomach tighten. It was named something like Receipts and Taxes, which would have been normal, except it had a little arrow showing it was recently accessed, and I don't know why that mattered, but it did. I clicked it because I was already suspicious, and because I thought maybe my shipping label downloaded there automatically. Inside were subfolders with months in their names, which again could be normal, except the icons weren't PDFs. They were audio files, and the file names were not tax words. They were dates and times, which I'm not supposed to use here, but imagine a string of numbers and underscores like a phone recording, and my throat went tight. I clicked one without thinking, and my own voice started playing, tinny and distant, like it was recorded from across a room. And I heard myself arguing, and I heard Ellis's calm voice, and I heard my voice climb higher the way it does when I feel trapped. My whole body went cold, because it wasn't one recording, it was a library, dozens, and the folder was organized, sorted like a collection. I kept clicking through them, not even listening to full clips, just enough to confirm, kitchen argument, living room argument, bedroom argument, the night with the dishes, the night with the missing package, the night I cried because he told me I was exhausting, all of it, sitting there in files. And the worst part, the part that made my hands shake so hard I had to put the laptop down for a second, was hearing his tone in those recordings, because it was so obvious when I wasn't in the moment. He would say something quietly mean, then pause, then let me react. Then he'd switch into calm, concerned voice, and it sounded like he was coaching a jury. I scrolled further down and found another folder inside the same receipts folder, named something like family, and my stomach dropped again, because why would arguments be under family? Inside were shorter clips, edited clips like someone had trimmed them, and the file names had labels like her yelling, or her admitting, or her irrational, and I felt like I was going to throw up because it meant he wasn't just recording, he was curating. I didn't even notice Ellis had gotten out of the shower until I heard him humming in the hallway, and I slammed the laptop shut like that would erase what I saw, and I stood there with my hands on the table pretending I was still dealing with shipping labels. Ellis walked in with wet hair and that relaxed face he has when he thinks he's in control, and he asked what I was doing, and I told him I needed to print something, and my voice sounded normal even though my whole body was screaming. He leaned over my shoulder toward the laptop, and I felt this panic spike, so I grabbed my phone and pretended I got a message, like I needed to step away. I went into the bathroom and sat on the edge of the tub and tried to breathe quietly, because I didn't trust myself not to make noise, and I felt this mix of rage and humiliation that made my skin feel hot. I could have confronted him right then, but I didn't, and I'm not saying that to be noble. I didn't because I suddenly understood the game. If I confronted him without a plan, he would record it, he would twist it, he would turn it into another file named her unstable. So I did something I never do. I got strategic. Ellis's family dinner was the next day, and Ellis was hosting, and he'd been acting like it was so important. Show everyone how good we are doing, and now I knew why, because he wasn't just hosting dinner, he was hosting a trial. I waited until Ellis went to run errands that afternoon, and I opened the laptop again. I didn't listen to everything. I couldn't. It was too much, but I skimmed, and I found exactly what he was trying to build. Every clip that made me sound sharp without context. Every clip where I sounded frustrated. Every clip where I cried. Every clip where I sounded like I was losing it. And right next to them were clips where he sounded calm and patient. There were also notes, not typed in a document, but little text files in the folder, describing what he wanted people to think, like proof she escalates, or she can't remember what she said, or she's unstable. And reading it felt like looking at a stranger's diary where you realize you're the villain character. I took photos of the folder structure with my phone, the file names, the labels, the edited clips, and I emailed the photos to myself. And I also recorded a video of the screen with my phone, slowly scrolling, because I didn't trust screenshots to be enough if he later tried to claim they were fake. I know that might sound like overkill, but when you realize someone has been recording you in your own home, organizing it, labeling it, you stop trusting simple solutions. Then I did the thing I didn't even realize I was doing until I'd done it. I searched the laptop for the word dinner. There was a folder in downloads with a presentation file, and my stomach flipped again, because yes, he had literally made a presentation, not a joke, an actual file with slides, and the title was something like Situation, and the first slide had bullet points about concern and patterns and how he's been documenting for months. I know I said no lists inside stories, and I'm not giving you the full bullets here, but it was that vibe, concerned husband, unstable wife, family intervention, and I sat there staring at it thinking, this is not a misunderstanding, this is planned humiliation. I didn't have time to fully process, because people were coming over soon, and I could already hear the driveway gate clicking from the first car. So I closed everything, put the laptop back exactly where it was, and I went into the kitchen and started moving like a robot. When the family arrived, Ellis turned charming. He hugged everyone, he laughed, he did the whole performance, and every time he looked at me, he had this subtle little smile like he had a secret, like he knew what was coming and couldn't wait. I kept catching his mom watching me, not with warmth, with that polite measuring look, and I realized Ellis had been priming them for this. Probably for weeks, probably longer, planting little seeds about me being emotional, me being hard to live with, me being unstable, so when he finally played the recordings, they'd already be ready to believe him. Dinner started normal, people milling around the living room, the TV on in the background, coats thrown on chairs, someone opening cabinets without asking like they own the place, the usual family invasion feeling. Ellis's sister Marin made a comment about my hair looking tired, which sounds small, but it landed because I'd spent the whole day trying to keep my face neutral while my marriage imploded silently, and Ellis laughed like it was cute, like he was on their team, not mine. We sat down at the table, and Ellis took the seat at the head like he always does when his family is around, like he's the host and everyone else is supporting cast. And he started with a toast, nothing sweet, just a generic family togetherness thing, and I watched his eyes flick to the laptop on the counter behind him, like he was checking it was ready. Halfway through the meal, Ellis stood up and tapped his glass, not loud, just enough to get everyone to look, and he said he had something important to share, and my stomach dropped even though I already knew. He started talking about how he loves me, how he wants to support me, how he's been worried about me, how he's seen patterns, and his mom immediately leaned in like she was watching a show she'd been waiting for. Ellis reached for the laptop, opened it, connected it to the speaker we keep in the living room, and he started playing a clip. My voice came out first, sharp, frustrated, and I heard myself saying something that sounded bad out of context. Then I heard Ellis's calm voice in the clip, gentle, patient, and then my voice got higher, and I could see faces around the table changing, his aunt looking uncomfortable, his uncle smirking like this confirmed what he already thought, his sister's husband looking down at his plate like he didn't want to be there. Ellis paused the clip and started explaining, talking about how this happens all the time, talking about how he walks on eggshells, talking about how he's documenting to stay grounded, and he kept using that word grounded like he was a therapist, which made my skin crawl. Then he played another clip, then another, and the clips were clearly chosen to make me look like a caricature. And I could see Ellis watching people's reactions, not with sadness, with satisfaction, like he was collecting verdicts in real time. I didn't cry, which surprised me. I thought I would, but something in me went cold instead, like my body shut off emotion to survive the humiliation. Ellis's mom reached across the table and touched Ellis's hand and told him she's proud of him for being patient. And hearing her say proud, I swear it made my ears ring, because it meant the whole plan was working. Ellis looked at me then, finally, and he asked me to admit I need help. He asked me to admit I have a problem. He asked me to admit I've been making their son miserable. And this is the part where I did something I didn't plan until the second I did it. I stood up, walked to the counter, picked up the laptop, and brought it back to the table, and the room went quiet in that heavy way where you can hear someone's fork scrape a plate. Ellis told me to stop, calm voice again, calm like he was talking to a child, and I could feel my face get hot, but I kept my voice low, because the moment I got loud he'd get what he wanted. I opened the folder he forgot to hide, right there, in front of everyone, and I showed them the file names, the labels, the edited clips, and I opened the text files where he wrote notes about me being irrational and unstable, and how the clips proved it. Ellis tried to grab the laptop, not fully lunging, but reaching, and I pulled it back and told him no, still quiet, and I could see his sister's eyes widen because it was the first time she'd seen him not in control. I clicked on an unedited recording, one of the longer ones, and I played it. In that recording, you could hear him baiting me. You could hear him making little comments under his breath. You could hear him poking at my insecurities. You could hear the pause where he waited for me to react. And you could hear the switch when I reacted, the calm voice, the concerned voice, the voice that makes him sound like the good guy. It wasn't some perfect gotcha. It was messy. It was uncomfortable, but it was real. And you could feel the table's energy shift, because people don't like realizing they were being manipulated, and they like it even less when it's their own family member doing it. Ellis's mom started talking over the recording, trying to explain it away, calling it concern, calling it documentation, calling it protective. And then I clicked to the presentation file, the one literally titled Situation, and I opened it. Ellis went rigid, like his body locked, and for the first time that night he looked scared, not of me, of losing the room. His aunt leaned forward and asked what that was, and Ellis tried to laugh it off, and it came out wrong, thin, and I could see his uncle watching him with this new look like, "Oh, you're one of those." Ellis's sister Maren snapped that I had no right to go through his computer, and I agreed, in the sense that it was invasive, but I told her he had no right to record me in my own home and build a slideshow to play at dinner like I'm an exhibit. Then his dad, who usually avoids everything, finally spoke. He asked Ellis how long he'd been doing it, and the question came out flat, almost tired, like he'd been watching Ellis become this person for years and hoping it wasn't true. Ellis tried to pivot. He tried to make it about me snooping, about my behavior, about how I'm proving his point by being dramatic in front of everyone. And then his aunt asked why he labeled the files with words like her unstable and her irrational if this was just about memory. Ellis opened his mouth, and nothing came out, because there isn't a clean answer to that. The dinner fell apart fast after that. Not yelling, just people going quiet, people pushing plates away, people suddenly deciding they had to leave early. His uncle making a comment about how this is not what family is, his mom looking like she'd been slapped, his sister glaring at me like I'd ruined a party, and Ellis sitting there stiff and pale like his own trap snapped back and caught him. When the last car pulled away, Ellis turned on me, no calm voice, the calm voice vanished, and the anger underneath it came out, sharp and ugly. He accused me of humiliating him. He accused me of ruining his relationship with his family. He accused me of being unstable and vindictive, and he kept trying to reframe it like he was the victim of my exposure. I didn't match his volume. I didn't argue point by point. I walked into the bedroom, shut the door, and locked it, because I didn't want him standing in front of me rehearsing his narrative while recording whatever reaction he could get. I sat on the floor against the bed, staring at the door, listening to him pace, and I kept thinking. He hosted a holiday dinner to play recordings of me to his family. He planned it. He built files. He labeled them. He edited them. And he thought I would sit there and accept the verdict. I slept maybe an hour that night, and it wasn't even real sleep. It was that half sleep where every sound snaps you awake. The next morning, Ellis left early, and he didn't just leave. He took his laptop. He took the evidence, and that should have scared me more than it did. But it just made me feel weirdly calm, because it confirmed he knew what he did was wrong. If it was innocent, he wouldn't need to hide it. I called in sick to work, not because I wanted a day off, because I couldn't stop shaking, and I spent the day doing the most depressing thing, making a timeline in my head of my own marriage, trying to figure out when it turned into this, and how long he'd been collecting files, and who he'd already shown them to. I also did something else. I texted his aunt, Soria, the only person at that table who looked genuinely disturbed, not just embarrassed. And I asked if we could talk, and she responded fast, which surprised me. She told me yes, and she asked if I was safe. Soria and I met the next day at her workplace. She manages a small art supply warehouse, not a cute little shop, more like a dusty back room with shelves and inventory stickers and the smell of cardboard. And she chose it because there were people around, and I appreciated that without her even saying it. Soria told me Ellis called her late the night of the dinner, after everyone left, and he tried to spin it like I'd ambushed him, like I'd hacked his computer, like I was unstable and dangerous. And Soria told him she'd watched him play edited clips at a holiday dinner like it was a courtroom, and she told him that was cruel. Hearing that from someone in his family felt like oxygen, not because I needed validation, because it meant I wasn't losing my mind. Soria also told me something I didn't expect. She told me Ellis has always recorded things, not like this, but little things, meetings, conversations, and he always had a justification, accountability, memory, proof, and Soria told me he used to record his sister when they were younger and then play it back to their parents to get her in trouble, and he'd do it with that same calm face. So this wasn't some new stress response, this was a personality feature. Soria asked me if I had copies of the folder, and I told her I had photos and screen recordings from my phone, and she told me to keep them somewhere Ellis can't access, and she told me to change every password, and she told me something else that made my skin crawl all over again. She told me to check my car and the house for other recording devices. I laughed at first, a short, humorless laugh, because it sounded too paranoid, and then I remembered the angle of his phone on the coffee table, and the way his watch was always on, and my laugh died. I went home and started looking, not tearing the house apart, just noticing, and the more I noticed, the more it felt like my own house had been watching me. There was a small voice-activated recorder tucked behind a row of cookbooks, not hidden well, like he'd gotten sloppy, and there was another one taped under a shelf in the garage, and I sat on the floor holding it like it was a bug I'd found crawling on me. When Ellis came home that night, I confronted him with the devices on the table, and for a second he just stared at them, then he tried to laugh, then he went cold. He started talking about how I'm proving his point, how I'm paranoid, how I'm snooping, how I'm invading his privacy, and he kept trying to flip it. But he couldn't explain why there were recorders hidden in our house, because there isn't a normal explanation. He tried to say it was for safety, for documentation, for protecting himself, and the way he said protecting himself, it sounded like he was reading a script he'd been writing for months. That night I slept on the couch with my phone in my hand, and I hated that I did, because it felt like fear, and I don't want him to have that. But my body was doing what bodies do when they don't trust the person in the next room. 2 days later, I packed a bag, not moving out, just packed a bag, and I took it to Soria's place because she offered her spare room and because staying in my own home felt like sitting in the middle of a stage where I didn't know where the cameras were. Ellis started texting, not apologizing, just demanding, asking when I'm coming back, telling me I overreacted, telling me I ruined the holiday, telling me his mom is crying because I embarrassed the family, and every message sounded like he was trying to rebuild the narrative that I'm the unstable one. I didn't respond because I was done feeding him material. Update 2 weeks later. I didn't go back to the house alone. Soria came with me the first time, not as a bodyguard, just as a witness. And the fact that I needed a witness to walk into my own kitchen felt like the moment my marriage officially died. Ellis wasn't home, which was intentional. I'd kept the message short that I was coming by for clothes, nothing else, and he replied with a sarcastic comment about me bringing my lawyer, and I ignored it. Then I waited until he confirmed he'd be out, because the idea of him standing there filming my face while I tried to grab sweaters made my stomach turn. Soria and I walked in, and the house looked normal, which was almost worse. Dishes in the drying rack, a grocery list on the counter, the little things that usually make a house feel lived in, and all I could think was how easy it is for something to look normal while it's rotten underneath. I went straight to the bedroom, grabbed clothing, grabbed my work laptop, grabbed paperwork I knew I'd need. Then I did one more sweep for recording devices, and I found another one tucked inside the linen closet behind spare towels, and I felt this wave of nausea like my body was finally catching up to what my brain already knew. Soria took photos of everything, not because she likes drama, because she has that practical brain, the kind that treats this like evidence instead of betrayal, and I needed that energy near me. On the way out, the garage door opened, and Ellis pulled in. My heart jumped even though I was ready. Soria stepped a little closer without making it obvious, and Ellis walked in like he owned the air, smiling at first, then his smile dropped when he saw Soria. He tried to act offended, like Soria being there was proof I was making things up, and Soria didn't argue. She just said she was there as a witness while I collected my belongings, and Ellis's face tightened because he understood what witnesses mean. Witnesses mean you can't rewrite everything later. Ellis demanded the devices back like they were his property and therefore his right, and I told him no, quietly. And he started packing in that tight, angry way like he was trying to decide which version of himself would work, charming Ellis or calm Ellis or angry Ellis. He landed on calm, the reasonable voice, and he tried to frame it as him being scared for our relationship, him needing documentation because I have outbursts, him trying to protect himself from false accusations. He used legal-sounding phrases without saying anything concrete, like he'd been reading online about how to talk like a victim. Soria asked him one question: why play edited clips at a holiday dinner if the goal is safety? And he didn't answer. Then Ellis's mom showed up. No knock, she let herself in with the spare key, puffy eyes like she'd been crying, and she immediately went into accusations, humiliating Ellis, destroying the family, being unstable, and hearing unstable again made my teeth clench because it meant Ellis's story had already been running in her head for a while. I played a short, unedited clip for her, just enough to show the baiting, and she shook her head and said it didn't matter because I still sounded emotional. Then she jumped to good wives don't behave like that. Then she said Ellis had been doing recordings because he was considering having me evaluated, because he was worried I was well, and she said it like caring, and it made my skin go cold because it told me they'd been building something bigger than humiliation. Soria told her the only person who looked not well was the man hiding recorders in his house and building a folder labeled her irrational, and Ellis's mom turned on Soria, accusing her of choosing me over blood. Soria told her blood doesn't excuse cruelty. Ellis stood there letting them go at each other while watching my face, and I realized he liked being defended, liked watching people talk about me like I'm a problem to manage. I took my bag, told his mom to return the spare key, told Ellis we can communicate in writing about practical matters, and I walked out with Soria. That night Ellis sent a long message that read like it was written for an audience. Justification, not apology, like he expected it to be read by someone else later. The next day I met with a family law attorney, not for revenge, to understand what he could do with recordings, what he could claim, and how I protect myself. I spent hours changing passwords, email, banking, utilities, everything, and it was exhausting in this uniquely adult way, like cleaning up after a fire while still smelling smoke. Ellis's mom and Marin kept calling, voicemails about destroying the family, embarrassing Ellis, overreacting, being unstable, and the repetition made me feel like I was living inside their story where I'm the villain. Then Noel, Ellis's dad, texted me asking to talk. We met in a plain office lobby near his work, security desk, people walking through, and Noel looked drained, and he didn't defend Ellis. He told me Ellis had been recording people for years, always with a justification, and Noel admitted he'd seen Ellis do it when Ellis was younger and thought it was a phase, and Noel apologized for not pushing back harder. Noel asked what I want. I told him I want Ellis to stop contacting me and stop painting me as crazy to justify what he did. Noel said he'd talk to Ellis. 2 days later, Ellis's mom showed up at Soria's house. That was when I realized Ellis gave her Soria's address, which meant he didn't just want to argue. He wanted to reach into wherever I was staying and pull me back into the story. Soria didn't let her in, talked through the door, kept saying no. His mom kept saying she needed to fix the family, and before leaving she called Soria an enabler of my instability. At that point, I filed for divorce and requested temporary restrictions on communication because Ellis kept pushing contact and his mother kept showing up. I didn't do a closure talk, I let paperwork speak because he loves records. Update 2 months later. The divorce process turned Ellis into exactly what I feared, tactical. He tried to use the recordings, framed it as documentation, painted himself as careful spouse living with an unstable partner, tried to submit edited clips, and the only reason it didn't land clean is because the folder labels, the notes, the edits, and the presentation file showed intent. My attorney told me to stay boring and consistent and not react, because reactions are what he collects. Ellis's family split in a messy, real way. Not everyone suddenly seeing truth, but enough people couldn't ignore the creep factor once it sank in. Soria stopped speaking to Ellis entirely, told his mom she won't attend gatherings if Ellis is there, which shook the family because Soria is usually the peacemaker. Noel withdrew too, quiet but clear, and Ellis's mom tried to pretend it was temporary. Marin doubled down, told people I snooped and I'm unstable, pushed the idea Ellis was protecting himself, and it made me realize she benefits from Ellis being the golden son, because then she's not the mess, she's just misunderstood. Ellis kept trying to contact me directly with pressure messages, slipping in comments about nobody else putting up with me, his family thinking I'm unstable, me ruining my life, and I stopped reading them. Attorney handled communication, and Ellis got angrier because he lost access to my reactions. The holiday dinner ended up being the moment his family started questioning him, because they saw his face when the folder opened, saw the presentation, saw the labels, saw how excited he was to play my worst moments. Noelle asked to meet again, told me Ellis's mother tried to pressure Noelle into pushing me to drop the divorce. Noelle refused, and Noelle told me Ellis admitted he made the presentation and talked about it like a strategy. Noelle also told me Ellis recorded Noelle too, and Noelle found out when Ellis accidentally sent him a file in an email thread. Noelle listened to his own voice in a clip labeled "Proof Dad Agrees," and Noelle said it felt like being watched by your own child. The last confrontation happened in mediation, bland room. 2 big table. Ellis walked in with calm face like he was ready to present again, tried to use documentation like a shield. My attorney laid out folder structure, labels, edited versions, hidden devices, presentation file, and Ellis cracked when asked why there were multiple recorders hidden around the house, snapped he needed to protect himself, and couldn't explain from what without sounding ridiculous. That mediation ended with separation logistics. Ellis walked out without looking at me, and it felt like a chapter closing. The divorce finalized a few weeks later. Ellis's mother called one last time to warn me, telling me I'd regret it, telling me I'm tearing apart a good family, telling me Ellis will move on and I'll be alone, and I blocked the number. Soria and I still talk. She told me Ellis's family holidays are split now, because people can't sit at a table with someone who records them and labels them like evidence. Ellis hosted that dinner to prove I was crazy, and the only thing he proved was he was willing to edit his own marriage into a slideshow to get applause. Final update, 6 months later. The divorce is final now, not pending, not in process, not waiting on one more signature, final. And it still feels weird saying that because for a long time it felt like the marriage ended at that holiday dinner, and everything after was just paperwork catching up. But the paperwork mattered more than I wanted to admit, because Ellis tried to turn paperwork into a weapon too. And the only way to stop being trapped in his version of me was getting everything in writing that I could point to when he tried to rewrite it. The biggest change is I don't live in that house anymore. I'm not giving details that would make it easy for someone to be weird about it, but it's a smaller place that feels like mine, not ours. And I didn't realize how much my body was holding tension until I slept the first night without listening for the sound of him walking around with his phone in his hand. And that sounds dramatic, but it's literally the truth. My nervous system was living like it had an audience. The second biggest change is Ellis is not allowed to contact me directly anymore. And yes, that was part of the final agreement, because he could not help himself. He kept finding ways to poke, not loud, not obvious, but those little pressure moves, the kind where if you react you look unreasonable, and if you don't react you still feel it in your chest for hours. After the first update, things went through this ugly phase where he tried to turn the recordings into the center of the divorce, not because he needed them for anything practical, because he wanted the story to be unstable wife abandons patient husband. He kept trying to make it sound like he was forced to document, forced to protect himself, forced to be the adult, and the weird part is I could tell he believed his own performance. He had this way of talking like he was already narrating a documentary about his life. The reason that didn't work is because he got careless, not with hiding the files, with how proud he was of the structure, the labels, the edits, the way he organized it like a project, and the more he tried to explain it, the more it sounded like a project, because it was a project. It was never about remembering what happened. It was about making sure other people remembered it the way he wanted. The turning point wasn't some dramatic courtroom scene. It was a boring day where my attorney calmly submitted my screen recordings of his folders, the clip labels, the text notes, the presentation file, and the timestamps showing it was put together before the dinner. Because that part mattered, it showed intent, it showed planning, it showed that he wasn't having a panic reaction in the moment, he was building a set. Ellis tried to argue privacy and snooping, and it almost worked on paper for about 2 seconds until the question came back again. Why were there voice recorders hidden around the house? Why were the clips edited and renamed? Why was there a presentation? And he never had a clean answer because there is no clean answer. There's just him wanting control and being mad he lost it. What surprised me is that his mother kept inserting herself anyway, like she couldn't accept she wasn't a party to it. She tried to send messages through Marin, through Noelle, through anyone, and every message had the same theme: I was ruining Ellis's future. I was dragging private matters into public. I was unstable and vindictive, and it was like she didn't realize repeating it just proved Ellis learned his script at home. Marin stayed exactly the same. She doubled down, got meaner, kept acting like this was all about me snooping on a laptop, like the computer was the victim, ignoring that someone was secretly recording their spouse, and then playing edited clips at a holiday dinner to get applause. Noelle didn't switch sides in a dramatic way. He just got quieter. and the quieter he got, the more obvious it was he was pulling away from Ellis. He stopped covering and smoothing, and he told Ellis he wasn't going to be part of humiliating someone for entertainment. Ellis tried to salvage the family image after the dinner backfired, invited people over again later, tried to host another get-together like the first one was a misunderstanding. And it didn't land the same, because once people know someone is capable of recording and editing and labeling, everyone starts wondering what file exists with their name on it. It wasn't me exposing him again that did the most damage. It was him doing it to them. Noel found out Ellis recorded him too, not with hidden devices, but with his phone during tense conversations. And Noel learned because Ellis slipped and attached an audio file to an email thread, then tried to play it off as normal. Noel listened to himself in a recording labeled like evidence, and something in him shut down. Maren got recorded too, which she didn't admit at first. But later Soria told me she found a clip of her own voice on his phone labeled like she was a problem, and she lost it on him, not because she thought it was wrong in general, because she thought she was exempt. After that, the family wasn't a cheering section anymore. His mom still defended him, but even she got rattled because it's harder to defend when you feel watched too. Noel basically stopped showing up to anything Ellis hosted, and when Noel stopped showing up, the whole dynamic shifted because Noel is the quiet foundation. The agreement ended up simple: property split, accounts separated, communication restricted. Ellis didn't get a victory where everyone agrees I'm unstable. He didn't get the big public validation. What he got was procedures and questions he couldn't answer without sounding ridiculous. And it wasn't cathartic. It was practical, which is what I needed. I needed an ending he couldn't edit into a highlight reel. The last time I saw Ellis in person was at the final signing. Fluorescent lighting, a table, papers, pens that don't work right the first time. Ellis came in with that calm face like he was auditioning again. Then saw Soria sitting in the waiting area with Noel, and his face tightened. Because even then he was still tracking the room, still calculating who believed him. He tried one last tactic on the way out, got close enough to talk quietly, made a smug comment about me regretting throwing away a man who cared enough to document. And it didn't hit the way it used to. Because once you know someone was building folders and labels and edits and presentations, the smug comments stop feeling like power and start feeling like a symptom. And instead of reacting, I walked away. The only thing I did that felt like a real ending was going back to the old house one last time with a third party present, grabbing the last small items I didn't want to deal with earlier, leaving my key on the counter instead of handing it to him. Because if I handed it to him, he'd turn it into a moment, and I refused to give him a moment. That night, I sat on my floor in my new living room with food that tasted like nothing, listened to the building settle around me, and realized nobody was recording the silence anymore. And the first time my phone lit up without my stomach dropping, it felt done. Not just the marriage, the surveillance part, the performance part, the part where I was living like my reactions belonged to him. And now they don't, and they never will again.